We are going to start with some of the key findings from the drawdown review, and that will also kind of ground you back in what we've talked about so far. And remember, the drawdown review is available on the website. The number one most important finding: we can reach drawdown by mid-century if we scale the climate solutions already in hand. Drawdown is a bold goal, but an absolutely necessary one. Of course it is. Number two, climate solutions are interconnected as a system, and we need all of them. We just heard Paul Hawken talk about this, and it's just so important. There are no silver bullets. We can't just do the top 5 and think that's going to be enough. And that makes a lot of sense. The climate crisis is about systems, and we need a whole system of solutions to address it. Number 3 is the realization that all of these solutions have co-benefits, and they are no regret solutions. They are things we should just do anyway, and even if they didn't have an impact on carbon. And when you talk about co-benefits, you can think of things like when you reduce emissions, what happens? Less pollution in the air, better health, right? When you work to restore ecosystems like the Amazon or the mangrove that's along the coastline, what happens? You protect biodiversity. So those are some examples of co-benefits. In this same number, they also talk about equity. And I know all of us here this is very important to our communities. And we can advance social and economic equity if we pay attention to who decides what solutions and programs, who is going to get the benefits, and how any harms are mitigated. So this again goes to the how is very important. The last one I want to point out is that the financial case for climate solutions is crystal clear, as savings significantly outweigh costs. They're very strongly worded, unfounded arguments about the economic inviability of climate action persist, but are patently false. And I've heard the current CEO talk about this, and he says, they're just not true. And they've run the numbers to prove it. So good news. So we're going to switch now to what you can do. And let me see what I have next. And it starts with recognizing these 4 levels of action. Everything's not a personal action, and everything's not a legislative action. And one of the founders from Project Drawdown, Will Grant, is going to talk a little bit about that.
In terms of a lot of social change, and especially in relationship to the environment, I think of what I call the 4 levels of action. The first is individual action. The second is action with my friends and family, the folks I'm directly connected to. The third is community and local institutions. And the fourth is the economy and policy change and changing laws. And so, in the environment, level 1 is, I recycle, I use less, I drive less. Level 2 is I get me and my family to do that. And maybe I put solar panels on my roof, and maybe I join a community-supported agriculture, a CSA. Level 3 is that's when I start to do things like change the way the schools that I'm connected to, right? The way that I change my workplace, that maybe I organize in my town, right, to start moving towards a community solar array, or that I start to, I go into the industries that I work in and I make changes. And the idea for level 3 for me is the place where it's at the level of institution and groups, but where I'm still known as a person, And so the example, and the other model that I give for level 3 is, if I can get in touch with a person who's in charge within about a week and get a meeting, that's what I would consider to be about level 3. Like with some work, I can get a brief meeting with the mayor of my town, right? And then level 4 is, like I say, policy. It's change the law. It's write your congressperson. It's boycott this product. And the environmental movement, I think in a lot of ways, has given the message that's been at level 1 and level 4. right? Change individual actions, or sign this petition, lobby this person, right? And the thing is, I think our greatest impact is actually at level 2 and level 3, and especially level 3. And the reason that I say that is, if I change a local institution or something that I'm involved in, I'm not just impacting my life, I'm impacting the lives of hundreds or maybe thousands of people. I'm also changing an institution, and then other institutions can take a look at that and take the model for that change. So an example is, like, say I get the local school to put solar panels on their roofs. I can actually get that done. That's a project that I can see through beginning to end in a year or two. And I can talk to all the people who are involved in it, and I can figure out the economics of that, like how much would it save and how much would it work and what would the cost be. I can organize and create a coalition to get it done, and I can do this part-time. I don't have to do this full-time. But the conversation that I have that I get to generate at the school is a big piece of the change, right? That the conversation with the principals and with the students and with the PTA is as useful as the change itself. And we're getting into this idea of, oh, we could do something about this. And then when the solar panels go up, then that means all of the other schools in the neighborhood or in my city have to go, why don't we have solar panels? I mean, this school did it. And so that's a level of a change that I think that we ought to be focusing on. And I think specifically with Drawdown, like there's these 100 solutions that are named in Drawdown. And the question is, how are they going to be implemented? But one of the things that the project did is that they looked at projects that were happening at what I've heard Paul Hawkins call from the middle out, not just from the grassroots up, not just from the top down, but from most of those changes were organized by people working at level 3.
Thank you. So I do hear somebody does not have their mic on mute. I don't know if Laura, if you have access to participate.
Yeah, I was able. I just muted.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I just have to set something up. Okay. Laura is going to talk a little bit more about these 4 levels of action.
Right. So we're just going to, in a few minutes, we're going to go through some examples at 4 different levels, so you can see how almost any solution can be implemented at 4 levels. And we're just going to compare kind of Will's approach. My approach is a little bit different. He has personal as the first level and family and friends as the second level. I lump them all together. Personal, family, and friends is something in a very small sphere. Then the next level, which he calls 3, I call 2, is community level. So that's something that you could do at your faith community, school, workplace, neighborhood, municipal government. Then I added a level which is systemic or structural, where you get to a critical mass or domino effect. It could be something that's happening at a county level, or it could be an entrepreneurial effort, such as someone that opens up a business doing one of these solutions. And then finally, we have the 4th level, which is legislative. And as Will and I, we both say that the personal is just too small. If we all take our bags to the grocery store, we're toast. It's just not to the scale of the problem. And legislative is too slow, and we don't always have the impact we want. So we're going to be focusing mostly on the community and the systemic level in our examples. And Beck's going to give 2 examples, then I'm going to give 2 examples.
Great. And, don't get hung up on what's exactly in 2 or 3. Just know that we need to expand those ripples. All right, let's take a look at electric cars. This is a big conversation for us here in the United States. You can see that that's going to take out 11.87 gigatons of carbon. So what are our 4 levels? You could buy an EV, your family and neighbors could. Next level, your church can install EV charging stations, if that makes sense. There's municipal parking lots, county buildings, local legislative, municipal, a law about the percentage of spaces that would be required to be electric, the parking spaces. And then up rebates, infrastructure bills, legislative emissions laws. All these are things you can do or support at the different levels for EVs. But before I move off of this slide, I want to think back to this difference between the technological solutions and our systemic solutions. And I recently have been reading about the effect of lithium mining to produce all the batteries needed for these EVs. And this is very disturbing because lithium mining will be happening in the United States. And it's just like strip mining for coal, which kind of bummed me out. And then I started reading about how hybrids can actually be a solution. At first, I thought hybrids were not as good because obviously they're not all electric. But the thinking now is that a hybrid with 20 to 50 miles of battery and then a gasoline engine for longer trips would actually have less of an environmental impact when you look at battery production and waste. So, you have to start thinking systemically. But what's outside of the technological fix? Things like carpooling to services is something we're going to try to start at our church, and keep on Zooming, right? So there's all kinds of ways to think about these. The next solution I want to talk about is geothermal. And I will quickly explain this. It is a little bit tricky. There's a little bit of science. So, underneath the ground has a kind of a very steady temperature. So I think it's around 50 degrees. So when it is cold outside, a liquid goes through pipes into the ground and picks up the heat that's there and heats that up so that you only have to heat above that level, that ground level. And when it is hot outside, it's still cooler underground. And so the system works in reverse, bringing up cool air. Some examples in your home are heat pumps, and a lot of areas are already built with heat pumps. Our church at MVUC has a geothermal and a solar system, so that can be at the church level. The municipal level, I know that Discovery School in Arlington has geothermal and solar as well. And you can also mandate net zero buildings and schools that would require then geothermal. And I also discovered that large power plants can also use this geothermal energy to produce steam that creates electricity. And Laura tells me there's a couple bills in Montgomery County related to geothermal. She's nodding.
And also, right, on the state level, they didn't pass this time, but they will next time.
There we go. So there's your levels. All right, Laura, you want to talk about a couple other ones?
Yes. So plant-rich diets. And again, this isn't the going vegan, but just eating less meat and making plants a larger part of your diet. This is something, again, we're going to go through the 4 levels. You and your family could plan meals that have less meat. On a community level, for example, at a church, you could have a church potluck that was meatless, and you could share recipes. You could develop a guide to vegetarian dining, as I guess Beck's at their church, they have a blog with a guide to vegetarian dining. You could start, if you were an entrepreneur, you could start your own vegetarian restaurant, or you could put pressure on restaurants to ask them to have more veggie options. And then there could be legislation about where your meat comes from to make sure it's forest safe. In Maryland, they tried to pass legislation that all the vegetables served in the schools would be from local sources. So that gives you an idea about the 4 different levels. Then I think the next one we have is composting, and that's one of my favorite. Really, it's composting, also food recovery. So your family could be making sure that you're not wasting food. At an elementary school, they could recover food that wasn't eaten in the cafeteria. Also, food recovery and food banks, countywide distribution programs are often using produce that's been recovered. And especially during COVID times, it's very important, that we have food security for everyone. But in terms of composting, this is my really favorite. On a personal level, you could be composting in your backyard. You could be part of a neighbor compost program. I don't know if our Greenbelters here know. In Greenbelt, we have 60 families that drop off food scraps at our Spring Hill Lake Recreation Center, and they come once a month and they do a work day to flip the food scraps and the wood chips to another bin and then to a third bin. And after 3 months, we have compost, which is shared. Also, you can be part of a drop-off, a neighborhood drop-off, where a company will come and pick up, let's say, from a municipal government, from their Department of Public Works. And then in some cities, they have curbside pickup, where everybody gets a bucket in the town, and you just put your food scraps out on the curbside, and a truck comes and picks up once a week. There's composting on a county level. I live in Prince George's County. We have a really large compost facility. I know they're going to be building one in Montgomery County. And then there are laws. We just passed a law requiring all institutions that were producing more than 2 tons a week of food scraps, like a hotel, prison, large supermarket, would be required to compost. So again, we're just trying to show you how every one of these actions can happen from the smallest to the largest level. All right, here's my turn again. So I'm glad, I think we have the Downses here from Greenbelt too, and Trudy's here. So just bragging a little bit about our city, some community level examples. We have a green team that's part of the city government, made up of volunteers. We call it Green Aces. We have this 3-bin system that I was talking about. It's Beck, I don't know if you can use your mouse in the right there in the middle, where the 60 families drop off and create their own compost after 3 months. Then the next picture over is our municipal drop off for people that don't want to be involved with composting. They can drop off their bins in that little shed, and a company comes and takes away the compost, or the food scraps, to the county facility. Then the next one over is our farmers market. All of the food at our farmers market every Sunday comes from with 100 miles, and so it's all locally produced. Then in the bottom right hand corner, we have our electric vehicle charging stations. We actually have 3 of them in 3 different parts of town, where the city is committed to encouraging more electric vehicles by providing the charging stations. In the middle here, we have a picture of Greenbelt that was built in the 1930s as a livable, walkable city. So then the more people live in an area where you can walk to visit neighbors or to the grocery store or farmers market and so forth, that's helps save on emissions. Then in the lower left hand corner, we have solar. So in Greenbelt, again, these are all Greenbelt examples. One of our recreation centers, one of our municipal buildings, has solar panels on the roof through a grant. And then the last picture here is a really big, it's our food co-op. It's a very large solar array. So this was privately arranged. So we got a grant from the Maryland state government. And then people that shop at the food co-op invested $350,000. You know, people put in like $2,000 or $5,000 for a 10-year to 3% rate of return. And so now the entire food store is covered with solar panels. Again, this was an initiative that citizens in the town took. So these are just examples of things that could happen on a community level, that it just took someone speaking up and saying, we should start this, and then it happened. All right, back to you, Beck.
That's all it took, Laura, and then 100 meetings and all right. So Project Drawdown measured the what. It's a scientific study of what actions and how much carbon, how much money, but they didn't talk a lot about the how. And so in the Drawdown review, they did speak that there are certain accelerators that will help these solutions become adopted. And this is just kind of a quick little chart, you know, changing our behavior. We talked about shaping culture. What's cool? Like, you know, you would never throw out food scraps, right? They always compost. Improving technology, we know building power is uniting together. And that's what a lot of you are here today to do. And if people who are just individuals, finding a group to connect with. So our power is multiplied. And then shifting capital, we haven't talked about, but where you invest, where your church invests, where you know, it just goes on up the level. So those are just a few things. And I'd also like to mention that not everything is about more solutions. I don't know how many people are familiar with Active Hope, but we also have different callings, different roles to play in this big change. Some people are changing the current system. Some people are creating new systems. And there's this area of attending to the suffering. This is kind of the spiritual or equity portion. And so, you find the place that you're called to and that works for you. So now I'm just going to give a brief little overview of how we at Mount Vernon Unitarian Church put Drawdown into action. So in 2019, early 2019, I went to a Drawdown presentation at Fairfax UU and I think, Laura, you did that one too. Yes. And the few of us who went, we were so inspired. We brought that back to our church, which had just voted to do a church-wide focus on climate change. This is right after the IPCC report, and just as Greta Thunberg was starting to draw our attention to the fact that we weren't really doing anything. And so, but we didn't have a structure, right? So Project Drawdown and this solutions-based conversation really inspired us. And so we developed our program and our teams around these solution areas, roughly. I mean, there are things that fell into the solutions and some things didn't. But the end result was phenomenal. By the end of 2019, we had 50 activities and events with over 1,100 participants. There's only 350 people in our church, so that we were pretty proud of that. And our goal was to draw a wide net and to make this something that spoke to all of our values, not just a small team of activists. So a lot of the things we did start with education. So we had 6 speakers and a couple of TED Talks. This is Dr. Thomas Lovejoy, and he is like the father of biodiversity. And he talked about the link between biodiversity and climate change. And the other thing we noticed living in the DC area is that we actually had quite a few people in our congregation who worked on these issues. We had a scientist from Oceans and Climate and someone, economist in carbon tax. So that gave people a chance to participate, and we learned a lot. And then we had our different teams, the plant-rich diet team. Here they are inspiring young people to really love tofu. And we experimented with a few alternative proteins from Mom's Market, barbecue worms or crickets. And some of the actions that came out of this, right here, you can see a repair cafe where people from our church and the community could bring things and simple things we could fix. And we actually had a couple experts too. We had a knife sharpener, a great way to have that reduction, right? Reduce, reuse. We made beeswax wraps. We had a workshop with Active Hope. We recycled enough plastic bags that Trex gave us a bench made out of recycled plastic. We wrote letters and visited our local Supervisor Stork, for different advocacy issues. But the biggest hit was the vegetarian potluck dinner. I even managed to cook something. I don't cook, but you can be sure it included chocolate. So I had a vegan chocolate cake. And then composting. We approach this in 2 different ways. We had some compost bins on our campus, which we opened up to the community. And here you can see our littlest composter. She's so cute. But a lot of people took these bins home and also did composting at home. So they could bring them to the church or do them at home. So that's an example of how that played out in our church. And Laura, were we going to hear from Gloria and Sylvia first, or would you want to go ahead and go do breakout?
No, we're going to do the breakouts first.
All right. So now this is your chance, given your worksheets and what you've seen and what you already knew. You're going to be in breakout rooms and have 8 minutes to talk about the solutions that you're interested in, what you'd like to do at your church or community, and any next steps that you're thinking of. So Laura's going to put you into these groups, and we'll have about 8 minutes. So there'll be 3 people per group.
Right,
So
right. We're going to make 9 groups, and Beck, you and I will join groups as well. And yeah, so because when we come back, we're going to brainstorm about what some of these solutions are that you think could really be put in action in the local community. So it'll ask you to join a breakout group, and you just hit, you click yes. So I'm going to start the groups now. Okay.
So you have about 2 minutes each.
And if there's anyone having trouble joining, I can join for you. Trudy, do you need me to put you in the room? I can't hear you.
No, we're fine. We've done this before.
Okay, because you're not in your room yet, but I can put you in. And Mafalda, do you need help getting in your room?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to get there.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay, I'll put you in the room. And Grace, I can put Grace in the room. Let's see.
Are we the only ones who came back? I think I'm pretty good about keeping Laura's timeline, so maybe everybody else will wait till they're kicked out. There we go.
too short.
It's always too short. It's always too short. We only had 2 people talking besides me, and it was too short. But hopefully you will have time afterwards in your
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
I've got to go let the dog out. I'll be right back.
And we have some time right now, Beck, right, to share some of the ideas people came up with.
So feel free to, you could raise your hand or just unmute and jump in with something that came up for you or your group.
So I was with, this is Molly Cameron. I was with Kathy and Barb, and we're just talking about two or three ideas. One was to take my personal family composting and use our neighborhood association, which is already in place. And my family already has a role in the social outreach aspect of the neighborhood association to create a neighborhood composting idea. And then the other idea Barb had is to try to get, and Kathy and Barb and I all talked about composting, and Kathy lives near a school, so the idea is to bring children in to involve them in composting. And then Barb said she'd also, having worked in the schools, like to get rid of a lot of the styrofoam that's used in the cafeterias. Is that right, Barb? Did I get that right?
Yeah, at this point, the trays and styrofoam, everything that the food is put on, they no longer wash trays and dishes. I wish we'd go back to that.
Very nice.
What about another room? What did another room talk about? And again, like Beck said, you could type in the chat screen if you'd rather do it that way.
Yeah,
Or
no, okay, our group, we talked about several things, but the first thing we talked about was how come we were three men? We feel like we were put off in the corner. There wasn't a single woman in our group. It was me and John Malin and Scott Spain. So, I'm sure it was just an accident. But
So you talked about sports or something?
no.
What did you do without us? I don't know.
I don't know. Oh, anyway, so uh, uh, I was looking at just as an example because I had a question in my mind. I mean, if you take, say, composting. I mean, you know, Judy and I are doing the composting now, but I wanted to know what was in their assumptions, and did they have any plan to kind of get there? And I looked on the you know, in the book, what they say was, here was the basis for their savings of 2.2 or 2.3 gigatons. What it says is, he says, in 2015, an estimated 38% of food waste was composted in the United States. 57% was composted in the EU. And if all the lower income countries reached the 38% level, and all the higher income countries reached the 57% level, then that was their assumption on the savings. If that happened, then they would get the 2.3 gigatons of savings. So that seems like a rather modest approach, but I still have this question. Well, how are you going to get from here to there? I mean, even in the United States, if we wanted to say go from our 38% in 2015 to 57%, which I assume is the implicit goal here. Has the Project Drawdown done any study on how you're going to get there? I mean, we can have a meeting here and people will have them composted, get them enthusiastic and all that stuff. But how are you going to get from here to there?
Clyde, that is, you know, one of the things that can be frustrating about working with Project Drawdown is that it is a group of scientists who are measuring carbon, right? So they're telling us the what, not the how. And so it's up to us to choose from that, you know, what the what is, and to understand, like, haven't you been composting? Like, I've been composting for decades, right? But now I know how much carbon that is going to help with climate change. So now there's something measurable that goes with it that and puts a timeline on it. That's the other thing about climate change versus the environmental movement in general. So that's work for us to do in our communities, is to figure out that how and to get people involved in it. I think we have time for one more person. Do you think, Laura?
Yeah, one more.
Oh, well,
What were you brainstorming in your groups?
Katie?
I'll just talk that we talked about plastics and recycling, and that's a little bit of a conundrum in terms of, like, we've been reading articles lately about, you know, a lot of the recycling efforts aren't working so well, or the plastics are ending up, you know, on beaches in India and things like that, and they're not really getting recycled. So we're wondering what we can do about that, because we can bring it to recycling, but then is it really getting recycled? And so we were talking about different containers and things like that, but it becomes difficult because almost everything comes in plastics these days, unfortunately.
Well, Katie, I think there's two things about that. That came up in our room as well. I think Richard brought that up. You know, is it even worth recycling? And one is knowing where those plastics are going, right? So the project we did with Trex, we knew our plastic bags were going to this company that made decking material out of it, right? And we knew that when we took it to Safeway, that they were also participating with Trex. But otherwise, really, like, you just drop it out, drop off, who knows, right? And so that's a good question. But that's why you also move up the community level and look at reduce, right? Oh, Sylvia.
Excuse me, but you refer to what? Tracks? What's that?
Trex, T-R-E-X.
What is
They
it?
make decking material for
Oh.
building decks.
And you were able to follow what happened to your recycled material?
I'll post some information about their program. It's
Is that
really,
ridiculous?
it's really fun. It's more of a community awareness program where you send them your plastic bags and you get a certain number of pounds and you will get a plastic, like, picnic bench kind of thing back, made from recycled material, composite. It's a composite. Um,
How much
We
is-
have a Trex
Oh.
deck and it's great.
right. Yeah.
You can-
They're
you can
very handy.
You know,
Hey,
one
Beck.
is to
Yeah,
arrange
Judith?
for a group visit to your collector, but even if you just go online, like, is your actual, like, our collector takes some things to the county but doesn't other things, and plastic is one of them. They claim they collect a lot of it, but what I'd like to know is where is it all going, and they
Very interesting.
so you find out which plastics are collected, because you're right, some of them are not. You think
Never
everything,
heard of that.
but it isn't.
Right.
Wow.
So this is a
Just
big topic,
learning,
Judith.
yeah,
You're
just
right.
learning. And then
I'm just going to ask, I'm hearing a dog barking in the background.
Yes,
If
I've got to get rid of that dog. She
some
wants,
people could mute and
Oh,
to
okay.
move
So Beck, yeah, I have
on
a
from recycling. Ready to wrap that up, Laura?
Yeah, I have a request that as we're moving on, as a way of having a record of what you talked in your breakout rooms, if someone from each room could just type in the chat screen, like, what were the topics that you chose that you felt would be applicable in your area at your church? So we've mentioned plastics, we've mentioned composting, but I think it is time to move on. And is this our time for our two guest speakers now?
Yes. And not just to leave people hanging, but there are ways you can find out that information and go to reduce, no new plastics, no new plastic packaging. There's at the legislative level too. All right. Our next, we are going to hear from our organizers from PAX and from NOVA's Caring for Creation team. So Sylvia or Gloria, which one of you wanted to go first?
I think I'm going first. Is that right, Sylvia? Yeah. Okay. So,
you're the model, you're my mentor, so you go first.
oh, okay. And about half of us on this call now are from Nova, so you kind of know what we've been doing. But we've been 3 years since we started a Care for Creation team. And this is actually a movement in the Archdiocese of Arlington for every parish. We're not a parish, but for every parish to have a Care for Creation team. So we're hoping to model that and be one of the forerunners. And there are 10 of us, but we only have about 60, 70 people. So that's about 10% of the community is actively leading on environmental things. And I think we've had quite the impact, and we do a year-long plan, and we definitely include it in our liturgies. We have the season of creation for 4 or 5 weeks in September, where we pray and we educate and we talk about environmental things, and then of course Earth Day, and anytime there's a chance to do it. And next fall we're doing a retreat on creation spirituality that will really spend a whole weekend immersing ourselves on our connection with nature and with and the spiritual call to care for the earth. We have tried to kind of keep those 4 different approaches. Education is a big thing. Educate ourselves, educate others, and then we're doing legislative actions, but where that's our weakest point at this point in time. We've changed a lot of things about what we do in the community. We no longer have paper products. We don't even use compostable stuff very much, because most of us haven't had much luck with compostables. They end up at the bottom of our compost pile 6 years later, and we're going, they're not always great. So anyway, we're trying to, we've invested in plates and knives and forks and cloth napkins, and that's what we use at all our social stuff. We have not done a vegetarian potluck. I think that's a great idea. And we haven't worked on carpooling, which I think is also another good idea when we finally get off the Zoom. But I'm feeling really positive, and I think most of the team is, about how much we've been able to do in a relatively short time. So that's Nova. How about PAX?
Well, we started our Caring for Creation group only a couple of months ago. We took Lent as our starting place. You know, it's an opportunity for change. It's a part of the church ritual. And so we hope that we would inspire everybody to become more active, because individually we have done certain things, of course, over the years we get a certain message, but we wanted as a community to be sharing information and inspire each other for action. So, and instead of denial or hopelessness, we wanted to offer a more positive approach to what we could do for the future. You know, Gloria, that famous line from Pope Francis: what kind of a world do we want to leave those who come after us? To children who are now growing up. For me and for many, that's so compelling. What is our responsibility to those, to the future, you know? And so anyway, of course, we had studied Laudato Si a number of years ago. And so we were inspired by that to finally form this group. And what we tried to do was start with certain, like 3 areas of approach. And one, we saw a need for an overall inspiring spiritual perspective. And then we saw the need for an action component to suggest not only individual actions, but also community actions and legislative actions. And then finally, the exchange of vegetarian recipes. And, you know, we started off with telling people how bad the consumption of meat was for the environment. And from that point, we went to the more positive approach. And I think that was probably the most attractive, the most interactive part of this group. We exchanged recipes on a regular basis, and that was kind of fun. And certainly in the future, we'll be doing vegetarian dine-arounds or some kind of gathering which would be vegetarian in outlook. I don't know how much time do we have. Yeah, we have a little bit of 5 minutes, we say. So that one person in each of those 3 areas committed to doing something during Lent to attract people's attention to this project. And we did that. A number of spiritually inspiring statements were offered, drawing on various authors, and also the insights of the Lenten calendar. I think probably you're familiar with the Lenten calendar, which for every day during Lent, there is a suggested approach, either to change or to action or something. And then I did myself, because I'm interested in change and action, I did something called a small change, which every week I offered certain ideas that might have been a little bit outside the margins, like, for example, making friends with your local grocery manager and asking him for more vegetarian, plant-based foods, or, you know, pointing out that the open bins of the refrigerants were really not a good idea. You could save a lot of money by doing something different. Asking for paper products that were made of recycled material. So that was kind of like getting personal with our approach to our environment. I also, another action that I recommended was signing up for newsletters like Yes Magazine or Green America. These things that funnel information are important. And I think we're inundated, of course, with information, but still to filter out certain approaches and certain bits of information that are really important for us as we go toward our goals. I felt that was a good thing to suggest to people. Then I also urged people to get into God's creation and bless it, going to see the bluebells. And also there's a group called Wild Earth that often meets in Virginia, Northern Virginia. And they gather, they drum and they sing and they celebrate nature. These kinds of things get you a little bit outside your usual patterns. And we agreed, the Caring for Creation group, which is about maybe 8 or 9 people have gathered, we agree that these kinds of things are good to think about. But the most important thing was the vegetarian recipes, I think. And we'll build on that, because when you start gathering together, eating food, you also share information. That's one of the things that I think we are having a disadvantage, that we're very small. We have like 25 people around the altar, or 30 on a Sunday. But with the Zoom, as Gloria and I have talked about, the Zoom attracts so many more people. We've had like 60 or 70 from other countries and different places. So it's good in one sense, but in another sense, it doesn't help too much in organizing. These people in Germany, what are they going to do with, you know, talking about solar panels on our roof? Do you know what I mean? So it's a little bit half and half. So we're also talking about showing a lot of films and discussing the films after liturgy on Sunday, extending the liturgy and having people watch films ahead of time and then discussing them after the liturgy. And the first is Hell or High Water, which combines 2 of our interests. The one of Black Lives Matter, which we studied a lot last year, and then of course the environmental piece of it. And so this film, Hell or High Water, combines both issues. And so this is a good thing to continue the one interest and combine it with our new thing. So then also linking to the same thing as Gloria is doing, the Season of Creation, where you get, you know, support from other groups in the community, the Elders Climate Action, both Gloria and I are involved in that group, a very good group. Lots of action offered. And the Franciscan Action Network, Archdiocese of Washington has Caring for Creation groups, just as Gloria mentioned. These support networks are important, linking with them and getting energy from them.
Sylvia, you have so many great resources. We are about out of time. Do you have a couple? Are you about to wrap up?
Yeah, I'm wrapping up. I'm hoping that we will have a retreat where we will address these things and how we might continue the kind of energy that has started at PAX. But we've only just begun.
Pretty exciting. You both have me wishing I could go to every church. You guys are great. All right. I am going to get back. We have your information on the next screen. So I'm going to go ahead and go to screen share. And if you want to contact Sylvia or Gloria, there are their emails. I'm just going to move this out of the way for you. Oh, geez. And the next speaker we have is Paul Hawken. He's going to end us up with some inspiration. All right.
And I'm putting Sylvia and Gloria's information in the chat too.
Thank you, Laura.
What we do know, given the science, is that
You need to turn it up. It's very quiet.
He is very quiet. Let me make sure I have everything clicked that is supposed to be clicked. I'm just going to do this again. There we go. Optimize for video. Thank you.
let's take them. Cool. I like long odds. It's very motivating, and you just accept them. It's not a matter of saying, well, I want even odds or better odds. No, they're just odds. And to me, it's a question of whether it's game over or game on. This is a game on moment as opposed to a game over moment. And what we are doing, smaller we, is reflecting back to humanity its collective wisdom. And what we're saying is, actually, we are on the case. That it's not as though we're numb and dumb and stupid. We actually do know what to do. We are doing it. We modeled what is. That's why we know it's possible. And in so doing, we're trying to reflect back to the greater we that we're on the case. Not only do we know what to do and are doing it, but humanity is just extraordinarily brilliant and such genius in us, And what's coming, that is what we didn't model, is extraordinary. And if you can't get from that a sense of like, well, it's game on, then you should probably do something else. But for me, and for I think everybody who's been touched by it and who's touched it by creating it, there is a sense that the odds are irrelevant. For game changers, they...
You know, I'm just going to pause right here. I see I've gotten the screen share wrong. Lord, let me know.
That's
So
fine. It still was working.
and I'm just going to get the second half of this, the last couple of minutes, because I don't want you to be distracted by anything. So
We weren't reading your mail or anything.
No. Hopefully you get a bigger picture.
There we go.
For that. Okay. And I'm just going to back them up just a minute there. There we go.
Relevant. For game changers, there's a quote in the book, and it says the one thing we haven't looked at is our mind. It's our thinking. Our thinking caused it. And when you change your thinking, it's a completely different world. You see a completely different world. And part of that is to understand that there is possibility in a way that is grounded, science-based, practical, doable right now. Is global warming happening to us or for us? Because if it's happening to you, you're the victim, you're the object, you got born at the wrong time, short end of the stick, not fair, you want to sue Exxon, you want to make somebody wrong, you want to demonize, you want to blame somebody else for how you feel and what's happening. It's not a great place to live or be or think or create. And if it happens for you, if global warming happenings for us, what does that mean? First of all, it means that it's beautiful feedback. It's feedback. If without feedback, we really suffer and get stupid at least. And not only is it great feedback, but it tells us what to do. It feeds our imagination. It feeds creativity. It feeds innovation. And it feeds a meaningful life. And you couldn't have a more meaningful life than to take on the greatest crisis human civilization has ever faced. And it's like, here, I have a gift for you. What is it? It's this, civilizational crisis. You came just at the right time. And we know what to do. That's the most important. We do know what to do. And this idea that, that the media keeps putting in our face, is that, that the 7 deadly sins are preeminent now and rule the world, and that's not true. And we just are blinded to it by what we read and see. And this is about changing who we are, how we think, how we speak, how we talk to each other, how we act. And I can't think of anything that would give more meaning to a person's life, than global warming.
That's the speech that has me coming back and keeping to volunteer. Let's see. All right, now's your chance to share one word that comes to mind when you think about climate change now. Laura, we're going to do this in the chat or just shout it out? Or both?
Yeah, let's shout it out. How are you feeling right now about climate change after hearing this workshop today?
Inspired.
Action.
Hope.
I was going to say hope and also totally psyched.
Possibility.
Patty says challenge.
Inspired.
Hopeful.
grateful. One word.
Scott, say that again. We couldn't hear you.
The experience, the faith and the hope.
You're being miserable.
I'm feeling inspired by the two communities that invited us and all that they're doing.
Yeah.
Connected. All right. Anyone else?
Motivated.
Nice.
Diversity, symbiosis.
Great. Anything else? Feel free to put in chat. Thank you so much. And Laura, do we have a little more time? Here's our contact information. And here are some resources to get you started. The Project Drawdown, Pachamama. I think Gloria or Sylvia was working with Elders Climate Action, which is doing a Drawdown Eco Challenge right now. And Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. 350 Fairfax is working on plastic. And Solar United Neighbors to help you start some solar projects. And of course, so much more.
And